Thank you very much, Rochelle. Hello, everyone. Well, we wanted to welcome you today to our webinar sponsored by National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparity, Health Excellence Action Network. I'm Mandana Khalili, Professor of Medicine and Director of the UCSF Research Coordinating Center's Investigator Development Core of the network. And again, we welcome you to our monthly training webinar. Today, we're honored to have Dr. David Haas speak to us on novel resources related to early stage career development. Dr. Haas is a professor of medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. He's also professor of pharmacology, pathology, microbiology, and immunology at Vanderbilt, and an adjunct professor of internal medicine at the Meharry Medical College. He co-directs the Tennessee Center for AIDS Research, and he's a leader in human pharmacogenetics relevant to HIV and tuberculosis, where his multidisciplinary research examines the importance of human genomics for HIV and TB drug disposition, efficacy, and toxicity. As well, he, for the past 16 years, has been principal investigator for the multidisciplinary R01 pharmacogenomics of HIV therapy. And Dr. Haas is a board certified infectious disease specialist. During this presentation, please don't hesitate to ask us questions, either by raising your hand or through chat function, and Dr. Haas will be happy to address those questions along the way and also at the end of the presentation. Dr. Haas, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Madonna. I am thrilled to be invited to give this presentation. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. And I should mention a big part of me being involved with this is that I'm part of our funded center at Vanderbilt, which is our Southeast Collaborative for Innovative Solutions for Chronic Diseases, funded by the same mechanism as the UCSF grant. And ours is a collaboration between Vanderbilt, Meharry, and University of Miami. So let me see if I can start sharing my slides. This is always a dicey moment to see if it works and see which view you all see. Are you able to see?
We are able to see.
I think I'm seeing presenter view. Yeah, and now it's
there
perfect.
we go.
Was that good?
Perfect.
Oh, good. And I'm seeing you all over in the side. That's even better. Yeah. So what I'd like to talk about in the next little bit is some novel resources related to early stage career development. And as I mentioned, I'm co-lead of our investigator development core for our collaborative that I mentioned, the partnership between Vanderbilt University of Miami and Meharry Medical College. I have no disclosures. My grant funding is from NIH. My goals for the next little bit are to share with you so you appreciate some challenges that I think are pretty universal to early stage career development and research, to appreciate, and this will be as a model, selected resources that facilitate early career development at our academic medical center, Vanderbilt. Some of these will be accessible to other folks as well outside of Vanderbilt, but unfortunately, some of them are still internal. And to encourage folks to pursue or to create similar resources at your home institutions if these don't exist. But I suspect that at many institutions, especially some of the larger ones, that resources such as these or even better resources exist at your institutions. So this is really to give a broad picture of the types of resources that may be available for early stage investigators in their career development. Uh, so by way of background, we are part of what is known as at Vanderbilt. We have something called a CTSA. Many of you may be very familiar with this. Some of you may not. But a CTSA, these are these very, very large NIH grants that are meant to support infrastructure at academic institutions around the country. So CTSA stands for Clinical Translational Science Award. Excuse me. There are more than 60 of these awards, and these are designed to support and accelerate research that has at least some connection with humans to speed up delivery of healthy solutions, improve the quality and efficiency of research, and to engage patients and community. Vanderbilt's CTSA is funded at about a little bit over $10 million a year. I say this because it's CTSAs oftentimes provide a lot of research infrastructure that goes heavily towards supporting early stage career development. And much of what I'll talk about would not be possible without the Vanderbilt CTSA. Vanderbilt's CTSA is called Victor, which stands for Vanderbilt Institute for Clinical and Translational Research. A major program that's supported in part by our CTSA is something called Edge for Scholars. And much of what I'll talk about during this hour falls under Edge for Scholars. It's supported in part by Victor, but also institutionally by Vanderbilt. And the overarching goal is to make research careers easier with a focus on early stage investigators, but it really applies to all stages of career development. So this Edge for Scholars program started 26 years ago at Vanderbilt by our current CEO and Vice Chancellor Jeff Balzer. And when it started, the initial start was simply to provide bridge grant funding for people who were not yet getting their mentored career awards like K's, but they had maybe finished up their earlier training and they were so they needed some funding to get them ready to get their first K award. And so they initiated in 1999 a program that provided a year or two of support to help people out. And that was really the beginning of this. It expanded over the next 26 years into lots of different things that I'll go into. And it's supported heavily by NIH through Victor, but also over the last several decades by very generous investments by Vanderbilt as an institution. And this is also important because it gives them a lot more flexibility. You can do a lot more things with your non-federal dollars than you can with your federal dollars. And this is the Edge for Scholars is available to people at Vanderbilt, as well as Meharry Medical College, which for folks who don't know Meharry is the largest private HBCU in the country as a medical school, graduate school, really phenomenal institution. Some of the resources are available beyond these institutions, but as I mentioned, unfortunately, many of them are not. Here is the mission of the Edge for Scholars stated is empowering biomedical researchers to innovate, create, mentor, and make enduring contributions. I like the slide. It just shows lots of the energetic activities that go on with Edge for Scholars, including retreats and seminars and workshops and just lots of good things that happen with Edge for Scholars. So Edge for Scholars, when, as I mentioned, it started with these kind of bridge funds, essentially, for early stage investigators, but over the last 26 years has expanded into lots of different resources that are shown on this slide. The color coding on the left breaks it out into various domains for writing tools, funding, et cetera. And then within each of these domains are the various resources that are available through Edge for Scholars. So, for example, And we're getting a downpour outside my window right now in Nashville. It's really kind of nice. Um, so under writing tools, for example, are things like grant pacing workshops, grant writing fundamentals workshops, a funded grants library, edge reviews, and a whole number of other things. There are a number of things here under funding opportunities. There are things under efficiency tools. There are something called learning from others, and then there are things that are offered through our CTSA, which are also very, very extensive beyond the Edge for Scholars program. So what I'm going to do is just touch on a slide or two about some of these to give you a perspective and stimulate some thought and discussion. So when people are writing grants, it's one of the most daunting things we do as investigators is writing a grant. Having to write these 12 or 13-page intense, perfect documents. And that's just the science. There is just so much more that goes into writing any large grant beyond the science, as we all know, all the ancillary information and materials that are needed. So having access to examples of grants that are the type of grant that you're applying for, whether it's a K or a F or an R or whatever kind of grant you're trying to apply for from NIH or elsewhere, is really helpful, especially if it's close to what you're working on. So Vanderbilt and some other institutions have emulated this, has established a funded grants library where people who've had their grants funded, if they agree, have their grant put into this library so for people to be able to search and use and emulate. So, for example, I remember getting, the last R01 I got funded immediately when I got my announcement. Vanderbilt reached out to me and said, "Oh, would you mind if we post this we put this in our grants library?" And they also include the summary statements, which is nice. So you can look at other people's grants that have been funded and look at their pink sheets and their summary statements and see what people had to say about these. Um, and at present, the grants library has over 500 funded grant applications across many, many different types of grants, foundation grants as well, VA grants, supplements, all different kinds of grants. And again, having the summary statements where it's where the reviewers critique your grant, so you can look at how people critique other grants is very helpful. As you might imagine, access to this is very restricted and not available outside of Vanderbilt and requires the mentors to sign off on this. Um, but it's really nice and it shows kind of an altruistic attitude. People tend to be very protective of their own research because research is so incredibly competitive. So the fact that investigators are willing to, give you their grant that you otherwise would never be able to see unless you're on study section, and for you to be able to use that is great. And so for trainees, broadly speaking, whenever you're writing grants, when it makes sense, it's great to not start from scratch. It's best to start with, materials that you can emulate and follow and really develop a great grant. I know at NIH they have access to grants that it can be shared as well. Those are mostly kind of examples of how to write a good grant. These go kind of way beyond that. So that's our funded grants library. Oh, and I should point out, I didn't mention this. At the bottom left of each slide is a barcode. That barcode will take you to these materials. If it's something that is Vanderbilt restricted, you will find out very quickly that you will not be able to access it without passwords. Other things with some of the barcodes, you can go straight to it and access information. So I encourage you to take advantage of the barcodes. Another thing which is really helpful is something called grants pacing workshops that are hosted by Edge for Scholars. Um, and this is, as the name says, the idea is to have people pace themselves to get a grant done so that they're not frantically at the last second trying to say, "Oh, where are my bio sketches? Where's my other support? Where's my this? Where's my that? Where am I?" To really help people do things well. So these are offered 3 times a year at Vanderbilt. They align with the the grant deadlines at NIH, and they're 2 half-day sessions that are in person. There's lectures, and then there's time to work on your own. And as part the big focus, a big part of it is building your timeline for your writing and editing. And the workshop starts about 12 to 16 weeks before the NIH deadline, so you can do all your things to get it done by the time your grant is due. Down at the bottom here in red, you can actually access and download a lot of materials related to this grant pacing workshop. Um, uh, and I'll give you a little bit more detail about this. Uh, so when folks, at Vanderbilt register or Meharry register for these, they have different workshops for fellowships, for career development awards, which are Ks, and for independent awards like ours to register. They have timelines set. And for the career development or awards, they also built in here um, something called Edge Review, which I'll talk about more in a minute. Um, so this is an example of one of the pieces of material that comes from this grant pacing workshop is for the individual who's going to be putting in a grant puts together this timeline from from when you start until you're submitting your grant and breaking it out into all of the different components. When we think about writing a grant, we usually focus on the aims and research plan, which are critically the most important things, and that's what's going to get your grant funded. But there are so many other, depending on the grant, so many other things that have to go into putting together that final grant package, which may be 200 pages long by the time it goes in. So putting it together this type of timeline is incredibly helpful. So you can tell when somebody at Vanderbilt who's putting in grants has been through these workshops, because when you walk into their office, you end up seeing something like this on the wall. So this is this is what people learn through the grant pacing workshops, is how to actually develop their plan and use these sticky notes, and so that you're actually each week, these are broken out week by week by week until your grant is due. And they're color coded. The red are all things related to the specific aims, purple is research strategy, green is career development, blue is letters, biosketches, etc. So this is a way to spread this huge amount of complicated work over many, many weeks and be on pace to get it done. And again, at the workshops, people are all getting together and working on doing this for their grant. And again, these happen multiple times a year. And these are, you learn these as early stage investigators, but then the people who've gone through these programs, every time they have a grant, they put together these tools and try to follow them. So let me keep going. So that's the grant pacing workshop. I mentioned the Edge reviews. Um, so when you're writing and submitting your research grant, which you think is the most amazing thing that you have ever done in your whole life. I remember my first grant I ever wrote many, many years ago. It was the most amazing thing I ever wrote my whole life, and it got torn apart. It was a VA Career Development Award, early stage. So I rewrote it, took all the responses, I wrote it again, and now it was even better. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever done. I sent it back in. It didn't get funded, and I said, "Boy, this is impossible." So I said, "This career is not going to happen." And I was about to give up. I rewrote it and sent it back in, and I thought, "This is the best thing. It's perfect. It will never get funded," and they funded it. So my point is that no matter how great you think what you're doing is, the job of a lot of these review panels, it's human nature, is to find problems with it, to tear it apart, to find flaw. That's just the nature of how it works, so that eventually it gets better and better and better. So the Edge reviews is a way to do that internally within our institution before it ever goes to NIH or wherever it's going to be reviewed. So these are NIH types groups of investigators to form a review panel or study section for investigators to review their grants before they ever get submitted. So these are set up like a regular study section. They mimic the NIH format. Um, uh, but, they're set up to be 3 times a year before about a month before the major NIH deadlines. So you submit your grant that you plan to submit, and a study section is assembled with relevant expertise, and they meet and just like a study section, review your grant. It's recorded, is video recorded, so you can see them criticizing, finding flaws, evaluating, and then a written summary statement is provided as well as a video to the investigator. When they first started doing these a long time ago, they actually had a video camera where the mentee or the trainee submitting the grant would not be in the room, but they would be watching like on closed circuit. But they stopped doing that. I think I don't know why. They just started recording them and making them available after the fact. But this is really a phenomenal resource to have the same type of people who would be reviewing your grant at study section, critically reviewing it before it goes in. So my advice, if you don't have this type of a format, is where you are, is to really bring in people with the expertise to critically review your grant with that, ideally with this type of a setup. The next item I'll talk about is and this is widely available to outside of Vanderbilt, and you may be very familiar with this. I'm not sure. There's an individual named Sarah Dobson who has developed this over many years, a grant writing fundamentals online workshop, as well as many other resources. You can access her materials and do things through her group, and I'll say more about this as I move forward. But once a year, they offer an online workshop, um, and that it's a free online workshop. And I was told that the reason it's free online to anybody who wants it is because Vanderbilt pays for it for the Edge for Scholars program, um, and because Vanderbilt pays for it for the Edge for Scholars program, and it doesn't cost any more for them to make it available through video, that it is widely available beyond just Vanderbilt for that annual workshop. So it's offered nationally once a year. It's taught by this individual, Sarah Dobbs. I'll show you her picture. I'll jump to the next slide. That's Sarah there on the right. I've never met her, but I'm sure she's a wonderful, great person. Um, And so this is an online forum. It's keyed to the R01 schedule, but it's applicable to all grants. It has self-paced videos and exercises that you can go along with. And it really is to teach you how to write an excellent grant and get really good reviews, how to write persuasively and get reviewers excited about your grants. Um, I'll mention I just reviewed an internal grant proposal yesterday, which was like the most phenomenal science that I had ever not that I had ever seen, but it was really great science from an early stage investigator uh, doing work in gastroenterology. But it just did not get people excited. I mean, it was great science, but what it needed was that extra push to tell you, why is this so important? Why is this the most important work in the world? And so from this grant writing fundamentals workshop, this is uh, some of the content that is part of it is you're creating your grant writing strategy, planning your schedule, which is uh, very much like the pacing workshop I showed, making your grant appealing, making it memorable under the hood, and getting good feedback. So again, that is widely available outside of Vanderbilt. The next thing I'll touch on is something at Vanderbilt, which is called a studio program. I know that there are similar things elsewhere. They may go by different names, uh, but it's a phenomenal program to support investigators at any stage of their careers, but it's really most helpful for, I think, for early stage investigators in many ways. And it is a way to bring together researchers with different expertise to sit around a table or a virtual table, hear about your research or what you're working on, and give you critical feedback and advice. These are available to any Vanderbilt or Meharry investigators, anybody student through professor. They are 1.5 hour sessions, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. At each session, and on average, 5 to 7 experts are involved. Since these started 20 years ago now, there have been over 1,600 studios. There have been just 34 since January of this year, and most investigators who bring their work to studios are early stage assistant professors or earlier or trainees. And on the right side, there's this pie graph to show you it's what these types of studios these are. They're categorized. Um, so the two biggest categories are design. Somebody wants to design a research study and they want input on how to design that research study. The next biggest is this blue box is grant review. This is where somebody actually has written a grant. Maybe they're about to submit it. Maybe they already submitted it and they got comments and they're going to resubmit. That's another big category. But there are other various other categories. For example, a specific aims studio where you're just trying to develop specific aims for your grant. You're at that very early stage, or maybe you're not even sure about your hypothesis. So you have a studio to talk about hypothesis or to write a manuscript. So all different kinds of studios that we do. And so the way it works at Vanderbilt, and it takes a lot of resources for this system to work, is somebody who wants to have a studio for, say, for example, a grant that they are involved in writing. It could be at any stage of that grant development. They fill out a REDCap form to request a studio. Um, there's an example of a REDCap form there on the right for a studio. They have staff in Victor who then take that and build out a space in REDCap with all the required documents, the grant, the biosketch of the individual, details about the studio. They upload the presentation, all of that. Then these pre-review materials are distributed to the experts who will be reviewing the grant. So here's an example of an assistant professor who's going to present on a project about tuberculosis and genetics of tuberculosis in African Americans. Here are the experts over on the right. You'll see that I happen to be the moderator of this particular studio. So these get distributed about a week in advance. And then the studio happens. These used to be in person, but now they're, as everything in the world, they're online. And the investigator presents for about 15 minutes, no more than 15 minutes of what they're doing. And then we spend the next at least an hour um, interacting with that investigator, asking questions, giving advice, coming up with ideas, and then the person gets feedback from this. And you can imagine how powerful this is. There, when you're writing grants, you certainly or a manuscript or whatever, you want feedback from people. And oftentimes what we do is we send the draft grant or manuscript or whatever to somebody and they edit it and send it back. And that's wonderful. And ideally, we even talk to them about it as well. But to have multiple people in the same room at the same time where they can feed off each other and come up with ideas, and it's just really great. So if this is available at your places, or it's wonderful. If not, if it could be made available, that's great. You could even do this very impromptu. So if you're working on a particular topic and you know of a handful of people who would be willing to meet with you and have spend an hour talking about your research, and they don't have to be it's ideal if they're not part of your research team because they're biased. It's good to get people who are separate and will see things in a very, very different way. And then after the studio, all this information gets fed back to the investigator. Yeah, and there's a regular But I should say there's not a regular schedule for studios because it's kind of depends on the availability of all the experts and the individual. And these can happen anytime, year round. It's just a wonderful system. I will mention that now with the major financial challenges that many institutions are facing with what's happening with the administration, including Vanderbilt, and with these programs being heavily institutionally subsidized, it's becoming more and more challenging to do these things. So hopefully things will improve moving forward. But when your institution puts millions and millions of dollars into these types of programs, which are investments, but then you have to worry about how do we keep all the staff funded. Sometimes institutions have to make difficult choices. I'll touch quickly on a couple of funding opportunities that happen with folks at our institutions. And again, these similar things are likely available at many other institutions. Our internal awards to help support faculty development. At Vanderbilt, they call it the Vanderbilt Faculty Research Scholars, or VFRS. Um, and they're not just for faculty, they're also for earlier career development people, but these are funding opportunities to really help people bridge from being trainees to becoming independently funded investigators. So these are funding very much like funded very much like K awards, um, which offer a lot of support for salary for trainees, as well as some early stage investigators, as well as some support for supplies and research. So this program provides up to 75% salary support for protected time, up to $25,000 in research funds. Um, and the idea for these is to help bridge people who may be in their training, they're trying to apply for a mentored career development award, like a K award. Um, I may have more to say on this on the next slide. They may be applying for a K type award, which are for faculty researchers, uh, uh, but they are not yet there, so they need another year maybe to get their independent K award funded. I shouldn't say independent, their mentored training award K funded. So these uh, what's called a KL2 or BFRS awards help to bridge people for that, ideally no more than 1 year till they can get their uh, mentored career development award, like a K funded. There are also these TL1 mechanisms for pre-doc and post-doc uh, students um, who are pursuing careers in research as well. So again, these or similar opportunities should be available at many institutions. And these types of mechanisms provide a lot more support than the kind of pilot awards that a lot of people apply for through this center or other centers, where you have an idea for a project, but you apply for funding and you may get, 25,000 or 50,000, but a lot of that goes for supplies and other things. These mechanisms that I'm showing are really designed to help support the investigator primarily until they can be, with their effort, until they can get funded. A few other things to talk about: manuscript sprints. This is something that can technically happen anywhere, but it's formally been set up with the Edge for Scholars program. And the idea of this is to have small groups of people work together to get their manuscripts to completion. The easiest thing in the world is to start writing a manuscript. The hardest thing in the world is to finish a manuscript. Um, you start with all this excitement and energy and you get into it, but then you start getting into sections of it that you really struggle, and there's this very asymptotic kind of relationship where you start off strong, but then you're like never quite getting there to having it done. So manuscript sprints rely on having people with a timeline and holding each other accountable to get things done. The way that these work, it works great for early stage investigators, but people who have done this as early stage keep doing it as they are mid stage. And a person who I work with who just got her full professorship at Vanderbilt, she did one of these manuscript sprints just a few months ago, and they still do them frequently. So the idea is to get a small group of people, at least three people ideally, 3 to 5, who are not in the same research area. They can be at any stage of their career, and have them get together on a regular basis, uh, the same time each week, ideally, and spend a few hours, spend a couple hours at least, being together and holding each other accountable for writing a manuscript. The way that the folks that I mentioned do it is all three of them are women. They all have, although this could be with anybody, they all are splitting time between um, their work and family, and and find it most effective to put time aside each week, a couple hours, where they go into a room together. They don't talk, they don't do anything except sit there and write their manuscripts. And the idea is to write one section a week. So this week I'll work on the introduction. I'll have that done this week. And then you're accountable because you know next week you're going to come back to your friends that you're working with and say, "Oh, did you finish your introduction?" "Yes, I did." "No, I didn't." So it gives you accountability, and you can bounce things off each other. And Victor also pays for professional technical editing, which is a little bit of a small carrot. I keep hitting something wrong that makes me go backwards. Um, so that's that. I'm going to just jump through this quickly because the various seminars that are available. I'm not going to talk about them specifically because, again, these will be available at lots of institutions. But the idea is to bring people together who are early stage investigators. So not only are they hearing great talks about career development, but also are interacting with other people at similar stages of their careers. And just here's some examples of topics that have been covered at some of these. Um, and then there are various translational research forums. One of the things I like is that once a year we'll actually have a retreat for the people who are involved with Edge for Scholars, where they'll get away from the usual workspace and go and do lots of fun things, have some talks, but also get to interact and engage. The last couple of things I'll touch on is, I'm looking at my time. It looks like I'm still good for time. Is uh, have to do with the fact that Vanderbilt has a very strong program in biomedical informatics. Um, which involves being able to do a lot of things with electronic medical records and lots of those kinds of things, but also lots of other innovative things related to biomedical informatics. A lot of you may be familiar with REDCap. I know lots of people use REDCap for lots of things. REDCap was invented at Vanderbilt many years ago by folks in biomedical informatics. Research Match, which you may be familiar with, came out of Vanderbilt. So lots of innovation in biomedical informatics, and I think they have the largest department of biomedical informatics of any academic uh, center in the country. Last check, I think they have 60 faculty or something ridiculous like that. Um, and so one of their innovations is something uh, called Flight Tracker, um, which it's focused toward tracking career development. And I'll say up front, it's largely for administrators. It's primarily to help people in administration better track career development of trainees, their publications, their funding they get, training activities, all of those things. Um, and there's also a scholar portal with this that allows faculty to enter their own data. But with biomedical informatics, it's a relatively new program, so it's still being improved. But the idea is for it to be able to actually pull a lot of this information from available resources so that people don't have to do it, and actually be able to track you without you even knowing that you're being tracked in terms of your publications and career path. And a big reason that Flight Tracker got started in the first place was anybody who's involved with training grants at the administrative or the principal investigator level knows that every time you put in this grant, your grant, or renew it, or every year, you have to fill out all these tables that for every trainee you've ever had, and where are they now, and what's their productivity, and all these kinds of things. Um, the impetus for Flight Tracker was really to try to make that as automated as possible, so it didn't become such a massive burden. So once this information was in the Flight Tracker, which is a program, that it could generate all of these necessary tables and documents that you would need. Um, so that's where I highlighted this in blue. That is to generate NIH training tables and other data reporting. At Vanderbilt, it's tracking 8,000 scholars and 120 projects. But Flight Tracker has been implemented at many partner institutions. It's been implemented at 72 institutions for 56,000 scholars that are being tracked. So I'm assuming that there are people on the call who are very familiar with Flight Tracker and hopefully find it helpful. Um, but down here in the blue, this is something I just learned about recently, is that for the individual investigator, Flight Tracker can actually potentially be useful with the data that are in Flight Tracker to help you generate useful graphs and figures. And I got a few of these from Scott Pearson here at Vanderbilt, who is one of our staff members who is leading the Flight Tracker effort. So here's an example of something easily generated from Flight Tracker, which is a timeline. This is one individual investigator. I don't know who the investigator is, but looks like they've been very, very productive. Um, a timeline of their papers and grants. So you can see from starting in 2002 here on the bottom through the present. Here are all, underlined are all the papers that they've had published, and then their grant funding shown here. I imagine if you were in Flight Tracker and you clicked on this, it would take you straight to that publication. Uh, I can't do it here from the screen. Um, so that is one type of graph you could generate. It'll generate your relative citation ratio, showing your highest citations, kind of the distribution of your citations. Another graph it can generate is you can break out your research into your research topics, and it can show all your different publications as they show up in each topic. So, for example, here's one topic is publications related to pulmonary alveoli. And this person had 13 publications, each one being one of these blue bars. So, various different subcategories that you can define. And then here's I skipped over one. And it can generate graphs to show you your co-authors. So here's a network graph showing all the different co-authors that individuals have co-published with. So continuing the bioinformatics theme, this is a new thing which is really cool. It sounds like it's still very much a work in development, is improving a lot. It's something called Flight Connector, also being developed by the same people who are doing Flight Tracker. And the idea for this is to help develop social networks for conferences. Um, by conference, I mean if there's a meeting that's going to be attended by, 300 people, whatever, that in advance of the conference, the idea would be that with all these people being together, what are their shared interests? What kind of shared, how closely are they connected with each other? So if it turns out that I am interested in diabetes and people living in the Himalayas, and there are three other people at that conference who also have that as an interest, I would never know that. And I would look back years later and say, oh, I didn't know you were at this conference. I would have talked to you. So the idea of this is to have a REDCap database that's filled out in advance of the conference, and then this then generates these materials that are shared with everybody at that conference. They can see how am I connected with people in different ways? How am I connected with people in bioinformatics or other areas? So again, this is right now, this requires input from the people who are going to the conference, and therefore by nature, it's extra work. And so people have to be really, really motivated to do it. But the goal is for this to actually become very automated and to be able to, again, pull from other resources and generate this before you even go to that conference.
Dr. Haas, a quick question. We
Yeah,
have someone asking about whether this tool is available to non-Vanderbilt individuals.
that's a good question. And I asked that, and I will tell you in 1 minute because I wrote it down. I think I wrote it down.
Sorry, I didn't mean this to a flight connector.
Oh,
I meant a flight tracker.
Flight tracker. Um, yeah, flight, yes. The quick answer is yes. The flight tracker tool, this one.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's available for people who are at the institutional partners. Again, it's at 72 institutional partners. So as long as you have access to the software, uh, the answer is yes. And again, I talked to Scott Pearson, and you're able to um, and if you want, you can enter the data yourself individually, and then have the outputs. If you try using it again, as I said earlier, start with the QR code and see how far you get with that. If you run into difficulty or have questions, reach out to me, and I'll get clarification and give more information on that. But yes, Flight Tracker is available.
Dr. Haas, when we look at the website, it basically refers to the consortium, but it doesn't have the list of the individual partners. Is that correct, or is it that that should be accessible easily?
That's a good question. I do not know.
Okay. There is an email there that one can actually connect with regarding additional information. So
Yeah.
that should be helpful.
Yeah, so the person you want to talk, you want to connect with, again, incredibly accessible. His name is Scott Pearson, and his information will be readily accessible at the Edge for Scholars webpage. So you should have no trouble connecting with Scott. And if you can't get Scott, let me know. But he's very responsive, very energetic, very enthusiastic, and he wants these tools to be very widely used and available. But he'll be able to tell you if there are limitations as well.
And same goes with the flight connector, correct, Dr. Haas?
Yeah, same for Flight Connector, but Flight Connector is at a much earlier uh, stage of implementation at this point.
Thank you.
I was looking for my notes because um, I was remembering incorrect because when I was thinking about it, I knew that there was actually going way back the funded grants library. I asked if that type of thing is available elsewhere and whether the software would actually create that. Apparently, it's been shared with Yale, from Vanderbilt to Yale, but I don't think it's the creating a grants library has been shared elsewhere. Um, so efficiency tools, again, these slides will be shared. I think they're perfectly fine for me to share. So I encourage people to go back and look at, click on the QR code. So for example, um, mentee-mentor agreements. There are a lot of documents here that you could download if you want them. Some things are Vanderbilt centric, like boilerplate information, which is only relevant to Vanderbilt. Um, but I will kind of skip over this slide. And believe it or not, Vanderbilt actually has a place where you can go look at books. So they have a lending library. I don't know if anybody's ever walked in that. Maybe this is where people put books after they say, "What can I do with all these books in my garage?" But uh, I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek. But there is a actually hard location library where where books are kept that are of interest to early stage investigators. So I've covered a lot of information about all these different topics. Hopefully, I have addressed these specific aims, the learning objectives. And my last slide is to acknowledge these are the key people who are the drivers behind the Edge for Scholars program. So here's Scott Pearson here down at the bottom, who is uh, over the flight tracker. They're the ones who make this whole system work. So I will stop there and be happy if there are questions to answer any other questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haas, for that outstanding presentation and giving us information about resources available at Vanderbilt, but also some that are actually accessible to others. And as you indicated, it's a great opportunity for us to know about these resources existing at an institutional level so that folks can actually look at their own institutions and sort of dig in a little bit more about the accessibility of these resources as well. And so I would like to open the floor as well as you indicated for questions. But maybe one of the things I will ask up front, the tool Flight Tracker sounds amazing. It really is very, very exciting to see what it can accomplish and outputs that it has is quite interesting. And I wonder to what degree has the career track, for example, from the NIH, it's one of the programs that is piloted as well at the NIH um, is is similar to this or will be utilized along with this, or is there any other, and with respect to sort of having the time to fill in all of these things from an administrative perspective and then having to redo them, I wonder if there's some challenges there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I think, and I'm not really heavily familiar with the NIH side of it. So to what extent these are in sync or not? I know that in part as for the CTSAs, that a lot of the work that Vanderbilt has done then, for example, with Flight Tracker, will then be a model that will be taken up by NIH or other people. So I honestly don't know. I'm just speculating that the Flight Tracker, but I'm speculating that the Flight Tracker was in large part in kind of a prototype, at least, if not kind of adapted to be the NIH model for how to make this, how people can how NIH can have the information that it sure seems like they would have access to anyway, but then ask you to fill out all these tables with the information that they should have access to in the first place, at least if they're federally related things. So,
Absolutely. I bet you that's what's happened as well, since it's been a long-standing tool. Um, I see no other questions. I guess that we don't have any other burning questions to ask you, and so we appreciate once again the presentation, and thank you so much for giving us all your wealth of knowledge and ability to sort of investigate as well locally about such resources. Also,
my pleasure.
thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye bye.